we have to... I mean, you obviously had to pack twice as many clothes, and if someone had forgotten your wardrobe, you'd be in trouble this morning. But you're there in the Arctic for us, and this is such a significant moment, isn't it? We have the climate change, the United Nations Climate Change Conference coming up end of October, beginning of November. A massive moment in the climate emergency, as people are calling it. The world's temperatures rising, and you're somewhere where it's almost like you're at the place which is the canary in the coal mine. Because what happens there, which scientists are on the ground measuring daily, impacts the rest of the world. And we've seen this year these almost traumatic climate events, the flooding in Germany, the fires in Greece. And what they're witnessing there is directly impacting those events, isn't it?
It is, and this is where we wanted to come here, to see it firsthand. You can read about it, you can talk about it, but to see it firsthand is so important, and that's how you see how dramatically it's changing. And like you said, the canary in the coal mine, this place, what's happening here, is a warning for the rest of the world of what is to come, or what could be our future if we don't start to mitigate the impacts of climate change. So we've been here since Friday, we've been having guides to different places. But the big thing is that here in Svalbard is warming more than anywhere else on planet Earth, more than 5 times faster than anywhere else. And that's having dramatic impacts on the entire way of life here, the entire economy. The glaciers are shrinking and retreating at an alarming rate. All around the world, all of the glaciers are retreating, and they're at their lowest extent in around about 2,000 years. The loss we've had in my lifetime of glaciers is the equivalent of cutting 24 metres off the top of an average glacier, and all of that ice goes into the sea, and that contributes to sea level rise, which impacts the whole world. And current projections by 2100 in my Charlotte's lifetime are that sea levels in the UK could rise by a metre, and that would have devastating impacts on so many coastal communities. 500,000 more homes at risk of flooding. Around about 1.5 million homes could be at risk of flooding by then. But the big thing we found out here is from the Norwegian Meteorological Institute. We have exclusive figures about how the temperatures are changing here. They've risen in the last 50 years in the winter by 7.7 degrees Celsius. And like I said, it's not just the landscape that's changing, it's people's way of life. It's the tourism that they can't do because there isn't the ice and there aren't the glaciers that they used to be able to go out on. They're having to completely change the way that they've been doing things. Everyone here is just so nice, and I feel really sad for them that this is happening, because they are trying their hardest to mitigate this. You know, they've closed the coal mines, they've done so much, but what we've done already, what we've committed to, even if we stopped emitting everything tomorrow, it's not going to stop. We are committed to these glaciers retreating, we are committed to the sea ice melting, we are committed to more sea level rise. But if we don't stop it soon, it's just going to get worse.
And the level of detail of change is really remarkable. I mean, you, for example, Laura, there today, we can't see him, but just out of camera shot, you've got an armed guard, which you probably wouldn't have needed 10, 15, 20 years ago. And that's because the polar bears, because there's so little ice for them to hunt from, there he is, the polar bears are much more aggressive now because they can't hunt for seals because there isn't enough ice to launch their fishing expeditions off. So they are coming on land and looking for meat. You represent breakfast. What kind of defence has the guy got to protect you if the polar bears come sniffing around?
So, yeah, we aren't allowed to leave the complex of our hotel without a guide or unless you have your own gun. First of all, I just would like to say that people have flares. So the flare would be the first thing if you saw a polar bear to do, to hopefully give that a warning, and then the polar bear would move away. But if they didn't, obviously, people are armed with guns if that was needed. But this is the polar bear's territory. But as you mentioned, the polar bears used to live on the ice. Tomorrow we'll be going out onto the ice fjord, to look at the fact that there is no ice for the polar bears. And the problem is the more we warm, that all melts. And it means that here, the amount of polar bears has reduced. And when we get to the season where the ice starts to freeze and melt and then retreat again, they can't make their way across land. So lots of them get stranded. Another big problem we have is with more rainfall here, the more rain they have, it then lands on the cold surfaces and turns to ice. And it means that the reindeer don't aren't able to break through with their hooves to eat. So there is a big decline in the reindeer population as well. Everything you can think of is impacted here. We have seen incredible before and after images of how glaciers have retreated due to the rising temperature. But right here in the distance, half a kilometre that way, was where the glacier that we are now standing on was. So when I was born in 1981, this glacier was half a kilometre that way. But it's not only that, it would have been around about 10 metres above my head. So this entire volume has been completely lost in just my lifetime. But the landscape here is jagged. There's beautiful mountains, there's glaciers, there's fjords, there's polar bears, there's reindeers. But the impacts of climate change are having far-reaching impact. The glacier retreat globally is at its lowest extent in 2,000 years, and this is having not just far-reaching impacts in high mountainous regions, it's affecting everybody around the world too. Earth is on the cusp of irreversible and catastrophic overheating. The last decade, the warmest decade on record. In the Arctic, warming is increasing up to 3 times faster than the rest of the world. And here in Svalbard, in the high Arctic, at least 5 times faster. New figures given exclusively to Good Morning Britain show that in the last 50 years, the average winter temperature here has increased by 7.7 degrees, and the average summer temperature has increased by 2.5 degrees. Nowhere on the planet is heating this fast. I came here to the Longyear Glacier with guide Arne Kristoffersen. He arrived in 1980 as a coal miner, the year before I was born, and showed me just how much it's changed in this short time.
Here we would have been underneath the glacier.
We would have been under the glacier here.
Yeah, so the ice cap of the Longyear Glacier behind me, it reached roughly 50 meters in front of us now, and some meter higher.
Glaciers are at their lowest for 2,000 years, and this retreat is only going to get worse. Current projections that we could lose 50% of all glaciers by 2100, and that would have devastating impacts on the UK. If all the world's glaciers melted, the average global sea level rise would be 0.5 metre. That's enough to put parts of the Humber, swathes of Cambridgeshire and Lincolnshire, parts of Kent and the Bristol Channel under water. The impacts I've witnessed here are a glimpse into our future, but this doesn't have to be our reality. My daughter, who is 4, who I talk to about climate change and who she knows I'm on this journey, she's got a letter for me to go to a polar bear, but I'm not sure I'm going to do that. If she were to come here to this glacier in 30 years' time, what would it look like? How would it have changed?
Well, she will not recognize this place as if she looks at the pictures from today. The glacier will be much thinner. It will have moved up. It will be very different indeed.
And what are your hopes and fears? What are your message to people watching about how we can change this, how we can make it better?
Well, I'm an optimist. We can change it if we work together. Everyone can contribute, but we also have to do things together that the single individual is unable to do. So system changes, energy systems, but we can do it and we must do it.